So imagine that you were a curriculum design team planning for Kiwanis Zoo School, where kids from Birmingham City come during the academic year for a week of school at the zoo. And imagine that you've decided to take what has been done, throw it out, and start all over to really take it to a higher level so that students have a powerful experience at the zoo. Well, that's what I found myself doing on Tuesday of this week. I was part of a team of 5, and we faced the challenge of redesigning the curriculum. We had about a day. There were 5 of us. And I want to walk you quickly through what we did and came up with as we used backward design as our key way to think about how we wanted to take this curriculum to a new 2.0 version. So, oops, I am not at the beginning of my video. One more time. So, we had to think about first our standards. We knew we wanted to integrate from math, science, English language arts, and social studies. We discussed for 20 or 30 minutes using Common Core standards, next generation science standards, and the existing course of study standards, thought about the ZooSchool experience, knew we wanted a limited set of standards, and we came up with this initial list of 1 social studies standard and 2 standards in each of the other 2 areas. Then, so that's what we wanted them to know, and then came the key question of how would we know that they knew it? So we decided then that what we wanted the students to do was on Friday of the week, they would do a presentation and we would construct a rubric with a level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4 performance for each of the standards we targeted. At that point, there would have been 7 standards, and for their presentation, we would have had a level 1, 2, 3, 4 for each standard. And then we discussed that rubric a little bit more. Summative assessment, group performance. We decided we want to see growth on the standards, not total mastery, because we already had them for a week, and some other things there. So we had, at that point, we had a sense of what we wanted them, how we would know that they knew what we wanted them to know. Make sense? Then we continued backward design by going deeper to each subject level. So let me walk you through those. Now we're going deeper. We started with 1 standard to try and figure out a process. We focused on science. These are the 2 standards we had talked about. We wanted to keep a smaller set, and in our discussion, we decided that this standard, Next Generation Science Standard, Middle School, LS2, 5, these are 7th graders, that's what we wanted to focus on. Take a look at the standard for a second. And we're focusing on elephant conservation. That's a piece I hadn't told you yet. Elephants are one of the lead species at the zoo. So the students needed to evaluate competing design solutions for maintaining biodiversity and ecosystem services about elephants in Africa. Well, then we applied backward design to their learning across the week for that standard. To think about a week's worth of instruction, we decided the first thing we needed to do was a pre-assessment. With a partner, they would draw a picture of where elephants live and where they live, to see what they knew, what the students knew already coming in the door about this standard. Does that make sense? Pre-assess, and we may have found out that they knew a lot or little or even misconceptions. We then brainstormed learning experiences. For this standard, we came up with 5, seeing things such as observing elephants, walking around in the Alabama wild section to see what Alabama environments are like, or problems that elephants face, the threats that they face. And each piece of instruction we talked about would have an embedded assessment to see how they were doing on that standard. We would then end with a final formative assessment on the standard itself, and we came up with a 2-solution analysis. Look back at the standard. They didn't have to develop solutions, they had to evaluate competing design solutions. So what we decided to see if they were ready to leave instruction on the standard was, if we gave them 2 solutions, could the groups analyze and present which solution that was stronger? And we felt like if they could do that, after all of this instruction, they were then through with learning about science, learning about this standard, and they would be ready. That would probably take till Thursday. They would be ready then to go on Friday and work on their presentation. So there's the first standard analysis. We repeated that process for the other standards. So working quickly, knowing that you can pause the video to read. Here's the math standard. It's basically inspecting a data set to get a kind of intuitive sense of it. So we would do a pre-assessment by giving them elephant data and see, could they get a general sense of it? If they could, we may eliminate some or all of these learning experiences. If they weren't at standard, we brainstormed 3 learning experiences, such as comparing data from zoo animals with data in the wild, because that would probably be different data. Animals in the zoo and animals in the wild are different. Each of these would give a formative assessment about how they're doing on the standard, and then we did a final formative assessment on poaching data, where we decided we would give them data over decades to see if they could make sense of it. End that up on Thursday, make sure that they are able to go from their learning on the standard to the actual, on Friday to begin working on their projects. Social science, there's the standard. So basically, could they explain how human actions modify the physical environment? We had a pre-assessment of a large group. We decided on this one, just a large group discussion to see what they knew about how humans affect the environment in Alabama first, and then in Africa, find out what they know. We had learning experiences, 3, such as an expert jigsaw lesson on human impacts in Africa. Each learning experience would have an embedded assessment back to the standard, and then we would end with a final formative assessment where they would draw a web to show that they could illustrate their understanding of the standard, but specific to elephants only. Could they explain how human actions modify the physical environments of elephants in Africa? If they could do that, we felt like they had learned what they needed to know and were ready to move on in the area of social studies for their project. English, we took a weird turn. Because of our 2 standards, we realized one of them was a process standard. We were talking about using groups throughout, and number 30 from 7th grade English Language Arts, you could look it up online. It was this beautiful standard for us about communication in collaborative groups. So we decided a point of action for us was to develop a group rubric using the bullet points in the Alabama college and career ready standards. The rubric was almost there. We just need to develop it and post it on the wall. That's our process standard, a little different than what I've talked about. And our English language arts standard, take a look at that. We focused on the technology standard for using multimedia and visual displays and presentations. And for this one, again, we need something a little different. They have iPads at ZooSchool, and we decided for their pre-assessment, we would just watch when they were using iPads the first time and taking them on an animal walkabout in the African animals to see, could they do, coming in the door, the kind of skills we wanted them to do? If they couldn't, we would embed technology skills training throughout the week to make sure that they were building their skills for this by Thursday, so that when they got to Friday, off we go to Friday. Now they're ready to do their project on Friday, and then we clarified our thinking. Remember our 1, 2, 3, 4? We then realized our next step was to take the social studies standard and describe on the project what does a level 1, 2, 3, and 4 look like for this objective when the students present on elephants. Same for English language arts. There's the standard again. We would describe for the presentations what does level 1, 2, 3, 4 look like. Same for our science standards, 1, 2, 3, 4, what does it look like in the presentations? And same for our math standard, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what would we want them to do with data in the actual presentation? So, all that makes sense? What did we want them to know in the standards, and how would we know that they knew it at the end of the week? And then for each of those standards, what did we want them to know, and how would we know that they knew it along the way up the mountain to actually attaining the goal of the presentation we're looking for? Hope that helps you understand backward design.